Teachers of Reddit, what is the smartest / most creative way of cheating that you've seen? I'm a high school teacher, but this story is about my own high school math teacher playing us and cheating. It was an honors algebra / geometry class, and it was well known that Mr. D reused the same questions every year, just changed the numbers. He made a big deal about making sure we all gave our exam papers back to him after we had looked at our scores and gone over everything together to prevent cheating for the next year. Well, of course, some of my classmates got their hands on a complete set of tests from the previous year. Soon, everyone had a set. Before each exam, we would sit together and make sure we knew how to solve every problem on that test, so we could do it on the real exam with different numbers. Years later, when I became a teacher myself, I saw Mr. D at a funeral. I confessed to him that this is what we used to do. He smirked and said, "Who do you think leaked the test packet to get you to study?" Mr. D had figured out that kids won't study if the teacher suggests it, but if they think they're getting away with something, they totally will. So he managed to get a test packet out and circulating as contraband. Blew my mind. College physics. Girl with a really intricate tattoo on her leg wrote formulas in between the tattoo lines. Even looking closely you couldn't tell unless you knew what you were looking for. You could tell it was test day because she wore shorts. There was a class that allowed you to bring one sheet of handwritten notes to exams. I knew a guy that created a font of his own handwriting and used to print the entire study guide onto a piece of notebook paper, front and back. He even set the font color to pencil gray and managed to get the margins and spacing exactly right to look like it had been handwritten. My girlfriend works for a dental exam company, which are obviously super high stakes exams. Since the exams are worldwide, they have actually found people from one time zone paying people from another time zone to email questions to them right before the exam starts. Not the student but the teacher. So, the teacher, let's call him Mr. A, had a reputation for being a phenomenal teacher who had every student engaged / invested in his class, no matter how mundane the subject. Anytime he asked a question, every student's hand would shoot in the air with them shouting things like "call on me" or "I know the answer." Simply, Mr. A developed a reputation in the district as one of its best teachers. Fast forward a couple years, and I'm grabbing coffee with Mr. A, and I ask him, "What's your trick? How did you get every student bought in?" His response, "Well, I told the kids every time we had a visitor in class, I need you all to raise your hand, like I was giving away free candy. But if you don't know the answer, raise your left hand. If you do know it, raise your right hand, so I know who to call on, and we all look good." Worked like a charm. My sister-in-law is a teaching assistant at her kid's school. Her youngest daughter, my niece, was 7 at the time. She stole the test the night before, pretended it was homework, and had her mom help her with her homework, then sneaked the answers into the test. One of the other kids caught her, let the teacher know, and my sister-in-law, who was overseeing test conditions, died inside when she realized it was the homework sheet that she had filled out. I was a teaching assistant for anatomy and physiology. The professor would ask for me to sit in on finals to prevent cheating. One kid came in with a vitamin water. No worries. Halfway through the test, the professor noticed they kept turning the bottle and squinting. This goes on for another 20 minutes. Professor goes up, grabs the vitamin water bottle and rips off the label. It had a crub sheet written on the back. The students had gone to the effort to make a fake vitamin water bottle label and write notes in the back. The professor was impressed by the creativity and decided to give the student a 0 and not report them to the academic committee. A classmate was printing the answers on his paper in a very pale gray so that it barely can be seen. Still got caught because the teacher noticed him reading an empty sheet. I did this once in a college class. Sort of. The class was real analysis and there was one problem that was absolutely going to be number 1 on the final exam. It had been number 1 for every final exam this professor had ever written, of which he gave us copies to study from, and it was number 1 on the study guide for our final. I couldn't do it. I tried and studied and got help, and whatever I did I could not figure out the finer point of this specific type of proof given in this specific context. So I resorted to memorizing the steps and getting it down to a sequence of blanks I could fill in. Exam day comes. I buy 2 blue books that morning, test booklets with lined paper inside. In one of them, I very faintly write the answer to number 1, complete with space to fill in the aforementioned blanks. On the front I fill in my name, to differentiate it from the other booklet. When the professor tells us to take out our blue books and trade with the person next to us, I trade my blank blue book. I take the one I'm given and slip it into my backpack. At the same time I slide out my blue book with my calculator and pencil, so it all looked legit. I get my test. Number 1 doesn't fail. It is exactly as expected. I fill in the blanks and write over my words. I continue on with the exam, and I pass the class. Stretch a rubber band around a textbook, write whatever you want on it, then when you take it off the textbook, it'll just look like scribble until you stretch it to see what's written. Spanish conjugations drove me to do some incredibly unethical things. High school kids recreated a Snapple label where the nutrition panel on the back had all the answers, formulas, etc. only got caught because I'd never seen the flavor before and wanted to see how much sugar was in it. As a student, I remember when my entire year level was accused of cheating, as the test results came back consistently high. What the teachers failed to realize was that some of the answers were actually hidden in other questions. So if you got stuck on one question, you could find the answer later on in another question. An example would be, this was a Japanese language test, what does word mean? And later on, a question would use that word in context, so you would understand what that word meant. My teacher shared with us a story about how, since she allowed eating during her tests, one person pulled out a giant bag of M&Ms and ate a specific color corresponding to A, B, C, D. It was a 2-student duo and they only got caught when another student ratted them out. In high school I was in a computer-based learning program and our science tests were taken digitally. However, they used a program where once you entered the test your entire screen was locked into the test, and the only way to exit it was to click the finish button on the test or turn off your computer, which effectively did the same thing. Another feature of the program was that once you were in the test, anything you had in your clipboard, copied text, was not able to be pasted into the answer sections on the test, to prevent the only other way to cheat. However, after creating my own classroom at home, making fake tests, and playing with the program to figure out a way to cheat, I realized that it would allow you to copy things from inside the test and paste them elsewhere in this test. The developers of the program also did not take into account the sign-in screen, where you have to find the test and enter it. Long story short, I could copy my entire page of notes I had taken on the test material, paste it into the section where I would enter my login information, then recopy it, enter the test and paste it again in one of the answer sections, using it to answer every question, and then deleting it before clicking finish. I remember in middle school we would rely on the one kid who actually studied. Most of the quizzes our teachers gave was multiple choice, so if the answer was A, the kid would cough. If the answer was B, he would sniffle. If the answer was C, he would sigh. And if the answer was D, he would stretch in his seat. Everyone in my science class was eventually that kid. Every time there was a quiz, a different person in the class would study. I was supervising a final chemistry exam along with another coworker. Not 15 minutes in, a hand slams down on a desk, and I turn around expecting the worst, only to see my coworker angrily shouting at a pair of really frightened 10th graders whose desk he smashed. Amidst the shouting I caught the words, Morse code. The guy proceeded to take them to the office. I called a hallway supervisor to take over, and ran after the group. Apparently, the kids were silently tapping the answers amongst themselves in Morse code. Not even with their fingernails, just their fingertips. I never heard a thing. My coworker happened to catch B in Morse code or something. I honestly thought he finally went crazy solely because of his appearance. Picture Robin Williams in Jumanji going, "What year is it?" I'm 100% sure that if this coworker weren't in the room, they'd have gotten away with it for sure.